Hi everyone, this is video 3 to our performance task, the one that we're writing about astronauts. Remember, there's 2 parts to this assignment that we have to do. So this is video 3. Today we are going to go over our main idea paragraphs. Your assignment was to write a paragraph for each source on main idea. I'll go over with you the one that I wrote so we can get a better understanding. And we will begin our part 1 of our assignment. Remember, again, there was 2 parts. The first part was to answer some questions in form of a paragraph. And then our final assignment, which is part 2, the assignment is to write an essay, right? So let's get started. I'm gonna share, let's begin with our, our main idea, the one that we were working on yesterday. So I'll go back to my screen. These are the slides. Remember, we wrote notes first. After the notes, we separated our source 1 and source 2, another T-chart stating our main idea. For main idea, we wrote down astronauts go through a lot of training in order to be their best up in space. And then we wrote down some supporting details. We did the same here with source 2, and we wrote our supporting details. So I took what I have here and I created paragraphs. That's what your assignment was, to create a paragraph with main idea and supporting details for source 1 and main idea supporting details for source 2. I'll share my next screen, which is my next paragraph. So the main idea and supporting details paragraph source 1, what is an astronaut? So I took just what I just showed you and I put it together into a paragraph. So I'll read it with you. Astronauts have to go through many hours of training in order to be the best astronauts there is. Their job requires them to study different things to be prepared for space. Astronauts need to study the Earth and the stars, as well as have basic first aid training to ensure they keep each other safe while on their mission. There are many cool things astronauts experience while they're in space. They learn how to do many things like eating, exercising, and even experiments while floating on the ISS. In addition to all of the learning and training, astronauts need to learn how to work together in small spaces. The collaboration and training among all astronauts keeps them safe and successful on their mission. So this was my main idea paragraph for source 1. And let me share my main idea for source 2. So again, I took my notes that I already had, all of this here, and I created my paragraph. So being an astronaut sounds like it would be an amazing profession, don't you think? Along with all the learning and training they have to do, astronauts' bodies also go through many changes while they are up in space. One thing they experience for days when they arrive to space is an illness that lasts until their body adapts to the change. Some physical changes that are visible are puffy face, a large neck, and a condition called bird legs. These physical changes have to do with the blood flow in the body. The blood flows mainly to the head while in space, causing their faces to puff up a little and their necks to grow. Astronauts also experience their legs getting weaker and lose muscle, a condition called bird legs. Lastly, astronauts need to eat healthy and stay in shape. This they do by exercising daily with large rubber bands to build their muscles. It's amazing to see the many changes an astronaut experiences while in space. Okay, so these were my 2 paragraphs. I hope you were able to complete your 2 paragraphs. If you didn't, you can take time to copy these down so you have this in your notes, okay? So today I want to start with part 1. Our part 1, I'll show you our assignment. This is the next page in your 2 articles, the page number 5 that is attached to it. So part 1, assessment items. So part 1 says, click on the boxes to match each source with the idea or ideas that it supports. Some ideas may have more than one source selected. So right now, what I want you to do, pause the video. If you don't have this in front of you, make sure you grab your articles and turn to that page. So you should have it right in front of you like this, right? So right on that page, you'll see the boxes. So we're gonna read the first sentence and then select which one would be the best source you would find this information in, okay? So the first one says, astronauts feel weak when they come back from space, okay? Would you find that in source 1, what is an astronaut, or source 2, life in space? Astronauts feel weak when they come back from space. I would go back into my article and try to find it. I found it, if you haven't done so yet, I found it in Life in Space, article number 2. If you look at the very last sentence, and I'll go back, I'll switch off back to the article. So right here, this section right here tells us, even with regular exercise in space, astronauts come back feeling weak. It takes time for them to go back to their Earth legs and learn how to live with gravity again. So in this case, we would check off life in space. This is where you would find this information under life in space. So go ahead and mark your answer on your packet here, okay? And let's move on to question number 2, second one. Since objects are also able to float in space, astronauts can easily lift things in space that are heavy on Earth. So where would you find that? If you can recall, think back of your reading, where would you find it, on source 1 or source 2? Since objects are also able to float in space, astronauts can easily lift things in space that are heavy on Earth. Go back and check. If you want to pause the video, go ahead and pause, see if you can find it. Okay, so I found it in article 1, what is an astronaut? And I'll show you where that says. So it says right here, it says objects in space can also float, so astronauts can lift and move heavy things easily. So that would be off of article 1, what is an astronaut? So go back to your page and check off article 1. Okay. And let's take a look at our last one here. Astronauts have a special view of Earth from space. Where do you remember seeing or hearing that? I do remember reading it. And that you would find, if you go back, you would find it in article 1, where it says, astronauts who see Earth from space say that it is round like a ball. While in space, astronauts can look down and see clouds, land, and water. Some can even see the moon up close, right? So that would be the answer for this last one here. So you would check off astronauts. What is an astronaut? That's where you would find it. Okay, awesome, guys. So we did number 1. So I want us to read number 2, and I'm going to show you my slide, and I'm going to start typing. So if you don't have your notebook where you've been writing your information and your notes, bring that out. Pause the video so that you're ready with a pen or pencil and your notes, and write where you're writing everything about astronauts. Remember, I told you, make sure you label. Make sure you write down astronauts video number 3, and you can also title it part 1, so that you know we're answering this part of the assignment. Okay, so let's focus on question number 2. It says, which source most likely has the most useful information about the kinds of work that astronauts do? I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to read it again. Which source most likely has the most useful information about the kind of work that astronauts do? So remember, source number 1 talks about all of the things that they need to do in order to become an astronaut, right? They have to go through a lot of training. They have to know how to work together, and they need to train for multiple things, not just whatever their job is, right? They need to know a little bit of medical aid. They all need to do the scuba diving so that they know how it feels to be floating in space. They need to do, all of them need to go through multiple trainings, right? So that was Article 1. Article 2, or source number 2, tells you about the changes that their body goes through in space. Like they get a larger neck, they get a puffy face, they get those oops, I'm losing the bird legs. Remember, their legs get very weak. Bird legs, and they need to do exercising daily to stay strong, right? So that's what both articles tell you. So which one of those will tell you what the astronauts do while they are in space, right? I'll read it again. Which source most likely has the most useful information about the kinds of work that astronauts do while they are in space? Think, source 1 or source 2? After you decide that, it says explain why this source most likely has the most useful information about the kinds of work that astronauts do while they're in space. Support your explanation with 2 details from the source. So we need to write a paragraph selecting which source is the best one, and then we need to add 2 details from the source to support our answer. Okay, we've done this before in class, so you should be able to do this. I'm going to start writing. Make sure you copy along and figure out. I want you first right now, think which source would you think is the proper one for this answer, for answer number 2. Which one would you pick? And then we'll start writing. Let me share my slides with you where I'm going to be typing, okay? Okay, so if you decided that source 1 was the best one for this question, for the answer to this question, you are correct. And I'm going to start typing, so I want you to copy along, and if you have to pause, go ahead and pause so that you can copy the response, okay? So here we go. I'm going to start a paragraph, so I'm indenting the source that has the most useful information about the kind of work that astronauts do while in space is source 1. Okay. Go ahead and write. I'll try not to type too fast so you can copy along. And again, don't forget, you can also pause so you can catch up with us, okay? The article titled, "What is an Astronaut?" And I'm going to underline it because it is the title of an article. What is an astronaut? Gives, oops, let me remove that. Gives the most, and this is not a capital G, it should stay lowercase, okay? I'm gonna try to fix it, but it's not. Gives the most information about what type of training. Let me fix this really quick, sorry guys. What type of training and the different assignments. They have to know how to do to keep everyone safe. For example, remember, it's asking us to, it says right here, support your explanation with 2 details from the source. So I'm going to start adding my 2 details on here. We're going to go back and check and see if we included everything that we needed to include in our response, okay? So for example, source 1 explains that astronauts have to go through many hours of training. They also need to be trained in multiple areas, regardless of what their special job in space may be. In addition, source 1 clearly explains how important it is for astronauts to learn how to work together. Their lives depend on it. This source is the best source in explaining what kind of work astronauts do in space. So that would be a number 4 response, guys. Here, let's go back and make sure we included everything that it was asking us to include. So let's take a look. The source that has, well, let's read our question. Which source most likely has the most useful information? Did we state that? Yes, the source that has the most useful information. I started with a complete sentence. The source that has the most useful information about the kind of work that astronauts do while in space is source 1. I'm stating it right here. I'm saying which source is the best one, okay? Now it says, explain why this source most likely has the most useful information about the kind of work that astronauts do. So that's where we created this paragraph. And then it says, support your explanation with 2 details. I used 1 detail here. For example, source 1 explains that astronauts have to go through many hours of training. That's 1 detail. Okay, it's asking for a 2nd detail, right? And I continue adding to my paragraph. Then I said, in addition, source 1 clearly explains how important it is for astronauts to learn how to work together. That's my second detail. So my friends, did we include everything that they were asking us to include? I did. So this would be a number 4 response. And I ended up with a closing sentence. This source is the best source in explaining what kind of work astronauts do in space. So you're putting it together and finalizing it with a complete closing sentence. So that was our part 1 for question number 2. I want to go back and look at question number 3, my friends. So explain why it is hard to be an astronaut. Okay, give 2 reasons from source 1 and 1 reason from source 2. For each reason, explain the source title or number. Okay, so make sure this is going to be your assignment. This is your assignment to do. Number 3, you need to work on it on your own. And I will share with you tomorrow what our response should look like. So I have it here. Explain why it is hard to be an astronaut. That's what you need to make sure you are explaining. Give 2 reasons from source 1. So make sure you have your source in front of you. You have to underline that so you know that, right? Go back to this one here. This is what you should be looking at, okay? And you're gonna underline where it says, give 2 reasons from source 1 and 1 from source 2. For each reason, include the source title or number. So every time you say, for example, source 1 says, you need to give the title of the article. And then if you go, if you're gonna give your source 2, give the title of that article, okay? So I'm excited for you to try this. Make sure that you complete your work before tomorrow. So go ahead and write your paragraph, similar to what we did in this paragraph here, this style, but now they're asking you to write 2 reasons for source 1 and 1 reason for source 2, okay? Thank you guys. Make sure you complete this before I see you tomorrow, okay? Have a good day and keep watching, keep learning, and keep watching all the videos so you can keep learning as well, okay? Thanks, guys.